Hi guys, Dr. Tracy, and this week we are talking about lists. Actually, the chapter that we're looking at is in two parts, and so we will be covering the first part, which is lists, and then we will do the next part, which is dictionaries, next week. So, like every week, there's a discussion, an assignment, and a quiz. You're used to it. I know it. But let's talk about lists. So in lists in chapter 5, there's the PowerPoint, and there things that have to do with lists are how to construct them, how to access them, how to use methods to manipulate them, and how to perform transversals of lists. That means changing the order. So those are the things that are in here. As you notice, I have added some additional resources about data structures, about lists, about tuples, which are similar to lists but are different. Wouldn't you like to know why? Yes, you would. And you know what? You're going to answer that. So I need you to do a little research on that one. When would you use the list? When would you use a tuple? But I'll talk about it. And then some function definitions and list tutorials are listed on here. I put these additional resources on here because while I think our book is pretty good, I know it's not everything. And sometimes other stuff helps you understand it better. So let's look at chapter 5. Let me go over this and what you need to know coming out of this chapter for lists. A list allows you to manipulate a sequence of values. So a list is going to help you organize data into groups so that you can have items or elements that not only retain their same information, but also show that there is some relationship between the items that are in that list, simply for the fact that they belong to the same list. So examples would be like you write a list for a grocery store. You might have meat and produce and cereal and crackers and snacks, but they're all going to be an individual element. But the fact that you've tied them together into a single thing that can be called shopping list is better than have a series of separate variables. So a guest list, a recipe, a text document, each of those is a list of things that has an index. The index is its position in the list. Now, the position in the list might be determined according to the way that it was entered, or you might change the sort order and it could be based on something else. Data structures can be ordered in different ways, but in the most basic way, we number them. And we start them numbering from 0. In all lists, that's true. This is a programmer thing. So the first thing is 0, and the second thing in the list is 1. And so that's why it says in a position from 0 to length minus 1, because length minus 1, if there are 6 items in a list, the first one is numbered 0, the second one is numbered 1, the third one is numbered 2, the fourth one is numbered 3, the fifth one is numbered 4, and the sixth one is numbered 5. So if the length is 6, the last one will be 6 minus 1 is 5. So that's why. And there's actually kind of a reason to it. It's based on computer architecture, because actually when we have a list, it's doing something that's it's like a mathematical step through bits. But I don't need to get into that whole thing right now. Just trust me, it all starts at 0. When we create lists, we can have literals, we can have basic operators, you can have values, integers, you can use all kinds of elements to put in a list. Lists in Python are much more forgiving if you've learned other languages where they all have to be of a certain data type. These don't have to be. And you can also have combinations and objects and expressions that produce results. Also, you can use the range function in Python, like this right here, shows list range 1 through 5. This list range 1 through 5 means give me a list of the numbers from 1 through 5. That's not a process you would get in a lot of other programs. There are other basic functions that you could use once you create a list. Length is one. LEN is length, and it will tell you how many elements there are in a list. Here's some other basic ones, like being able to print or to look for every variable that's in a list to find a specific value. These are operators or functions that you can use within the operations of lists. A list is mutable. Mutable is a programmatic term that just means I can change it or move it around or put something else there. When we say it's mutable, it means that any element that's in a list, whatever the list is called, like in this shows example 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, example 3 is equal to 0, 1, 2, 3. Index 3 would be 4 until this statement happens, and then you can see the changes that result. The list now contains 4 integers, 1, 2, 3, and 0. So when we replace an element in a list, you treat it in much the same way that you would treat replacing the value of a variable. But you just have to realize that the element within a list is named by the name of the list and the index of the element itself. There are several methods that help you insert and remove elements to your list, like append, extend, insert, pop, and then pop with an index. Append adds an element to the end. Extend adds the elements to the end of the list, elements of L of another list. Insert lets you put an element in the middle. Pop returns the element at the end, and pop with an index returns an element in any spot. So there's some examples of how to use those. When you're using a list, you can search for a list by asking for a certain value if it's in a list. Like in this example that says if target in a list, then it's going to look for 45 in all of the values that are stored within a list that has 3 elements right now, but it could have 3,000, and so this would be a lot more useful. And in sorting a list, they are naturally ordered by the way that they have been entered, but you can also change the sort by using the sort function, and that will put them in order. All right, that's a lot of the basics on lists, and there's a little bit more examples as you go through the text that will show you how you can make some changes in your lists, and you can add different elements to your list and see which lists are equivalent, but that's a great place to start. Your discussion this week is to take a look at lists and tuples. A big difference between tuples and lists is that tuples are immutable. Earlier I said lists are mutable. It means you can change them and you can change the elements. So now when you think about a tuple, the main difference between it is it's going to use the parentheses instead of the curly braces to define the tuple. And then it's also going to have these values that cannot be changed or manipulated. So now I want you to think about why, and that's where you can get back to answering this discussion for Prog 5, which is when would you use a list and when would you use a tuple? All right, have fun with that, and I will talk to you soon. Have a good week.